So, If I Can Dream with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra was actually a pretty big success for Elvis. It went to number one in the UK. It didn't do too bad in the US either. But especially, like I said, overseas, it was a much, much bigger success. So, of course, what do you do when you have a big success? You cash in. You do it again. You go back. You do a sequel. And one of the sequels was The Wonder of You with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. And also Christmas with Elvis and the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. And these are okay, I guess. This one I don't really care about all that much. They don't like by the time this one came out, it almost feels like part of the agreement of doing the first two was that they had to agree that Sony would get one of these out of this, because it's literally just Elvis's Christmas album from the 50s with some of the 70s songs, like the best of the 70s songs tacked on, stuff like Winter Wonderland, Silver Bells, The First Noel, sort of Christmas standards. Merry Christmas Baby, which obviously a lot of Elvis fans like because it's very bluesy, very up his alley. This one you can kind of take or leave. I would much rather go back and listen to Elvis's, originals in the case of the Christmas album. This one, on the other hand, this one is kind of interesting because, yeah, you do get, like with the first one, you do have some of the obligatory songs. You get Suspicious Minds. You do get Don't. You do get Memories. The Wonder of You, obviously, with being the title. You get Always on My Mind, which, as it turns out, this version of Always on My Mind has become a pretty well-liked hit on YouTube. Like, people go stream that one like crazy. The version of Big Hunk of Love on here uses his 70s master, and it's sort of interesting. It does the same sort of swelling thing that they do on Burning Love on the first one, so it doesn't have quite the same punch, the same impact, but it's okay. It doesn't have the same kick, which is unfortunate because it puts you on the wrong foot. Whereas I think it would have been better to lead maybe even with the second track, which I would argue is worth the price of admission on all three of these albums alone. Like, the rest of these you can kind of take or leave, whether you like the orchestral overdubs or whether you like string sections or however you feel about Elvis's vocals being utilized in a context like this. If you have not heard I've Got a Thing About You, Baby, from this, The Wonder of You with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, do yourself a favor, listen to that. They completely changed the arrangement of the song. They bothered to tighten up Elvis's vocal. They sped it up ever so slightly. They gave the song a little more structure. And then they added in the bass riff from You're So Square Baby, I Don't Care, that Elvis plays, or Elvis played back in 1957 from Jailhouse Rock, You're So Square Baby, I Don't Care. There's a whole story behind that. And then it just goes for this really fun, uplifting, like it's almost like a dance track, like, but in like the best traditional sense, like not a dance remix, but like I want to get up and dance when I hear this. Like, it's so good and it's so lively, and it again, it gives me sort of the feeling of like hearing an Elvis song for the first time that you've never heard before. Because as much as I like the original I've Got a Thing About You, Baby, Elvis does sound a little tired in that original recording. And the band is pretty muted on that one. But when you get a band that's really, into it in the studio, and they're piecing it together, part by part, and then you throw on this orchestra and they're very lively and they're honestly lightening up Elvis's vocal, not with any trickery, other than just speeding it up to match the tempo of the new arrangement. But what it has the effect of is making Elvis sound like he's enjoying performing the song. And yeah, it's fascinating. One thing that is added on here as well is a duet with Helene Fischer, who I guess is a German singer, on the song Just Pretend. And there's a solo version as well. And she's an all right vocalist. She kind of reminds me of Celine Dion in terms of vocal style. I'm glad it's the last track on the album, because I can skip it if I want. Um, I don't know. It's fine. I've heard actually that Lisa Marie's favorite song of her dad's was "Just Pretend," and obviously, like every person, your favorite Elvis song is going to change. And I can imagine having such close personal connections to your dad's music, your favorite song would probably be in flux throughout your life. But "Just Pretend's a really excellent song with a great vocal by Elvis that does get highlighted on this album. So. And yeah, there were some bonus tracks that were released on some various versions of these, particularly overseas and here in the States. I know the deluxe version of this, I picked it up digitally because it had the 4 gospel songs that were on the original Christmas album back in the 50s. Those get an orchestral treatment, and then there's just a random assortment of all right other tracks. I have them on in my archive on my hard drive just because I collect remixes. That's a thing that I used to do, and it's a thing that I still kind of keep track of and want to make sure that I'm hearing all these official things like this. But they're just fine. Like, you don't, if you have a choice between listening to the original or the deluxe edition, it doesn't really matter. But like I said, if you really want to get the peak of what the best this project could offer, this experiment, check out "I've Got a Thing About You, Baby." That arguably was worth however much in marketing dollars and studio time they spent with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra just to come out with that, I would say. So I enjoyed these to an extent. Again, Christmas one you can take or leave, but I know not everyone likes when Elvis's stuff gets kind of messed with. But to each their own, and it was an interesting project.